first little devotion for our Read Through the Bible in a year, this year, starting today, March 1st. And we're doing this live, of course, and hopefully it's working. So you never know what can happen, but we will begin. It'll be just a short little devotion. The One Year Bible is a really good resource. We'll be talking about some of the reasons why it's such a good resource for reading through the Bible in a year, or even 2 or 3. We'll talk more about that later too. In the link that I gave you, both for our app and on Facebook, you can see the readings there that we'll be using, and it even has a way that you can listen to the audio version of the Bible reading. So that might be something that's really handy. Or you can get the One Year Bible hard copy, or like I do, I use Kindle. So we'll dive in. Enough introduction, and I'll share some devotional thoughts on the readings for today. So there are many things that we could talk about today for sure. The Old Testament, for example, has many of the civil laws which regulated the life of Old Testament Israel and talked about how they should be governed. So in this reading, you see the Sabbath for the land, which took place every 7th year. And you also see how every 50 years debts were canceled. The one exception, interestingly enough, was for houses within a walled city. And perhaps the reason for that is that these houses, being in a walled city, didn't have any connection to the land, which had been apportioned among the tribes and clans of Israel. It was divvied up, and each one had their own specific allotment. And this is a way that that could be retained. So it made a lot of sense, no pun intended. Now, as we continue to look at our Old Testament reading, it talks about slavery, and just an important note that it doesn't condone or endorse slavery. In fact, it actually sets pretty stringent limits upon their practice of slavery, to give a very good clue that this purely human institution of slavery had serious flaws that were part and parcel of it. And so that is something to keep in mind about the Old Testament reading. Now, as we get to the New Testament reading, it's interesting because it's such a heartwarming reading. First, we see Jesus's love for children displayed very prominently in that famous passage. And also we even see Jesus's love for the guy that thought that he had obeyed the law perfectly. Of course, no one can keep the law perfectly, and it's a good prayer to pray to God, saying, keep me from ever thinking that I can fulfill the law perfectly, because I need to know that I can't. Why? Because I need to know how important and how much I need Jesus. Jesus is the only one who kept the law perfectly, and he did so in our place. So that is a little bit about the New Testament reading. As we look at the Psalm, that is a lament. They are bemoaning life's difficulties in that psalm, and the author is hard pressed by life. It just seems to be not fair to him as he's making this bold plea to God for help. It's interesting that later on in the New Testament, Paul takes up this psalm and quotes it in Romans 8:36, leading up to Paul's glorious assertion that nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love in Jesus Christ. We are more than conquerors in Jesus, who gave us his victory over sin and over the grave. One particular advantage of the One Year Bible is that it breaks up the Proverbs into individual proverbs, 1 or 2 proverbs at a time. And that's really the way that Proverbs is meant to be read. It's not like chapters elsewhere in the Bible. It's just a bunch of proverbs in a row. So it's good to look at them individually. And as we look at this particular proverb for today, Proverbs 10:20 says, "The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, but the heart of the wicked is of little worth." And in that little proverb, there is a great deal of wisdom. We might easily think that our heart is the choicest treasure that we have. Our inner life is so precious to us. And this proverb reminds us that if God has purified our inner heart, and He has in Jesus Christ, through the death of His Son, God purified us. And if God has given us a renewed inner being, that isn't just to keep to ourselves, even though it's our inner being. It's meant to be expressed for the benefit of others. That is why the tongue, our speech, the words that we say, are so very precious, like choice silver. God, the master craftsman, the artist, the potter, has shaped us and molded us our whole life long so that we can be a blessing to others also, especially by the words that we can say to them. How can your words be a blessing and a nourishment to others tonight and this weekend and for the week to come? That is a good question to ponder, as tonight perhaps you're going to be getting ready for bed soon and having your bedtime prayers. Maybe you can include that, asking God to open up your understanding as to how you may use your speech to be of service to God and others, to be for their benefit and not just your own. Well, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I hope that this has been a blessing to you because it is God's Word. Now we'll sign off for the evening, and I'll go to bed before too long. May you also have a peaceful and a restful evening and a good night's sleep. We will talk to you soon. God bless.